My family disowned me for marrying a waitress now. My business funds their lifestyle. But they'll never know they're living off my name. I'm a 28-year-old guy. And I never imagined the person I loved would turn my family against me. I grew up in a household where appearances mattered more than feelings. My parents were always impeccably dressed, always hosting, always watching the neighbors. And my siblings had learned early how to get praise by following the rules of status. Me. I was the quiet one, hardworking, responsible, ambitious, in small, steady ways. I respected my family. I respected traditions, and I thought that was enough to keep us all connected. But when I met Emma, everything I thought I knew about loyalty and family would be challenged. Emma worked as a waitress at a local diner, and from the first time I saw her, there was something effortless about her. She laughed freely, genuinely, without caring who was watching. Her hands were always a little greasy from work, but they were strong and steady. She didn't care about labels, about wealth, about how she looked in someone else's eyes. She cared about honesty, hard work, and kindness, the kind of things I hadn't realized I was starving for. Within weeks, I was drawn to her warmth, her sincerity, and the way she made me feel like I could be myself. The first time I brought Emma to meet my parents, I could feel the judgment slicing through the air before anyone even spoke. My mom pinched her lips, barely hiding her distaste. "She's nice," my dad said, his voice tight. "But are you sure she's the right match for you?" My siblings exchanged subtle smirks, nudging each other like they'd already decided she wasn't good enough. I wanted to defend her, to tell them that love isn't measured by bank accounts or family names. And that's exactly what I did. I made a choice in that moment, a choice that would ripple through my life in ways I couldn't yet imagine. I knew the road ahead would be rough, but I also knew one thing. I was going to marry Emma. No matter what anyone said, but even as I made that decision, a small, uneasy voice whispered in the back of my mind, "They're going to make this as hard as they possibly can." The fallout was immediate. Though I didn't see it coming in full until later. My parents didn't show up for our engagement party, and when I called to tell them, my mom's voice was cold, clipped. "Can't support this," she said, as if the words themselves were poison. Lingering in the air long after the phone clicked, dead. My dad was silent in the background, only sighing. The kind of sigh that carries disappointment, shame, and subtle anger all at once. My siblings, who had always followed Mom and Dad's lead, started texting me little barbs disguised as jokes. "She's cute. For a waitress, hope she knows what she's getting into." I could feel the sting, but I refused to let it reach Emma. Emma, bless her, saw the tension instantly. She held my hand and smiled gently. "They're scared," she whispered. "Scared you'll be happy without them controlling it." Her words should have comforted me, but instead they left a hollow ache. The family I had always thought would stand by me was now a wall I couldn't break through. I began to understand that love wasn't just about two people. It was about facing the world together, including the ones who were supposed to protect you. Weeks turned into months of awkward silences at family dinners, uninvited visits, and backhanded compliments. One evening, my sister laughed too loudly at a story about Emma spilling coffee during our first date. "You really went for a girl like that?" she said, smirking. The words were casual, but they carried the weight of judgment, the echo of my family's values crashing against my own choices. I wanted to yell, to make them see Emma the way I saw Hertha. Warmth, the honesty, the heart, but it was like talking to walls painted with years of pride and stubbornness. Despite the tension, despite the whispers and pointed glances, my heart only pulled me closer to Emma. I found solace in her world, messy, imperfect, but real. And in quiet moments, when she rested her head on my shoulder after a long day of work, I whispered to myself, "No one will ever make me regret this. I chose love, and that's mine to hold." But even as we celebrated small victories together, I could feel the undercurrent growing stronger. My family wasn't going to let this go quietly. Starting our life together was harder than I expected, but in a way that felt honest, alive, and ours. Emma and I moved into a tiny apartment above a bakery, the smell of fresh bread seeping through the walls every morning. It wasn't fancy, far from it, but it was ours. I worked long hours at a marketing firm, barely leaving the office before sunset, while Emma pulled double shifts at the diner. Always cheerful, even when she was exhausted. Some nights I'd come home to the sound of her humming in the kitchen, stirring something simple but comforting on the stove. It was those little things, the smell of her cooking, the warmth of her presence, that made me feel like I'd finally found home, even in the chaos of bills. Late nights and cramped spaces, I started dreaming bigger. I wanted financial independence, a life where Emma and I could make our own rules. I started plotting out business ideas late at night, scribbling numbers on receipts and napkins while she leaned over my shoulder, offering ideas or quietly cheering me on. "You're going to make it," she'd say softly. "I just know it." And for the first time, I believed it. 2. But while we built our little world, my family kept poking their heads in, sometimes literally, other times in whispers that found their way back to me. My mother would call and drop comments like, "Don't forget who you are and where you come from," while my sister texted snide remarks about my quirky choice in life partner. It wasn't enough to break me, but it was enough to remind me that my family had decided I no longer belonged to their world. The tension started to feel like a storm hovering over us, subtle but constant, every time I got a paycheck. I found myself hesitating when they asked for help, small emergencies disguised as friendly check-ins. Something in me didn't trust it anymore, not fully. But I pushed the thought aside, telling myself that love was worth weathering their judgment. Still, the seed of unease had been planted, and I could feel it growing. They don't just disapprove. They're going to try to make us pay in ways I can't see yet. It wasn't long before the subtle disapproval turned into something sharper, something I hadn't anticipated. My family started to attack Emma indirectly, using words like weapons disguised as concern. At a holiday dinner I hadn't even asked them to attend, my dad muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I just hope she can keep up with the life we've worked so hard to give you." My siblings laughed quietly, sipping their wine, their eyes flashing with the satisfaction of feeling morally superior. I could feel my stomach twist, but I forced a smile. Refusing to let them see how much it hurt, Emma, ever perceptive, noticed the tension immediately. "Don't let them get to you," she said, brushing my arm gently. "They're scared of losing control. They don't understand us, and that's okay." Her voice was calm, unwavering, but inside, I felt like a balloon, slowly deflating, pride and anger mingled with sadness. The people who were supposed to be my anchors had become strangers with sharp edges, and all I wanted was their acceptance. Even in private, their words haunted me. Calls came in asking for money for emergencies, or hints about loans they supposedly needed. My mom's tone was sweet, almost apologetic. "We wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate, dear." I felt torn. A part of me wanting to help because it had always been drilled into me that family comes first, but another part recoiling at the thought of being manipulated. The resentment was quiet, simmering under the surface. We tried to focus on our own life, decorating the apartment with mismatched furniture, laughing at burnt dinners, and celebrating small wins at work. But every time I thought we were safe, my family's shadow stretched across our lives, reminding me that I had chosen love over tradition and they weren't going to forget it. And yet, despite the growing tension, I held on to Emma's hand that night, looking into her eyes and thinking, no one can take this from me. But deep down, sensed that what was coming next would test everything we'd built and possibly break us if we weren't careful. By the time my business started taking off, I thought maybe things would ease a little. I'd poured hours into developing a small digital marketing firm. Late nights fueled by coffee and determination, with Emma quietly holding down the home front. The first few clients came through, and I felt a surge of pride I hadn't realized I was capable of. Emma celebrated with me like it was Christmas morning, her laughter filling the apartment, making the cramped space feel bigger, warmer, and alive. For the first time, I imagined a future where we weren't constantly under the shadow of my family's judgment. But just as our lives were beginning to feel stable, the first test arrived. A phone call from my mother in the middle of a Friday evening. "We're struggling, dear. Could you help us out with a little loan?" I froze. The excitement from my latest business deal draining instantly. Emma placed a hand on my shoulder, her eyes calm but questioning. "What do you think?" she asked. And I thought about all the nights I had worked myself raw, about all the ways I had chosen to put us first, and I hesitated. It wasn't just money yet. It was a trap I didn't want to fall into. Every emergency had come with undertones of expectation, guilt, and subtle manipulation. Yet part of me, the part raised to see family as sacred, wanted to help. Let me see what I can do," I muttered, already feeling the familiar tug of resentment growing in my chest. Emma didn't say anything, just squeezed my hand and let me wrestle with it. Knowing I needed to come to terms with my own boundaries, and then came the sneaky, almost absurd irony. My family started living more lavishly, showing off in subtle ways. Trips to restaurants I couldn't afford on my own just months before, hints of upgrades to cars and furniture. I couldn't yet see the full picture, but something told me we were funding their comforts in ways they didn't even realize. A sick sort of pride mixed with anger settled in me, anger at being disowned. Pride in knowing I was building something they couldn't touch. Still, I told myself it was harmless. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a lesson my family was about to learn, when that would turn everything upside down. The twist hit me like a punch I hadn't seen coming. I was reviewing our monthly accounts one late evening, Emma asleep on the couch beside me, when I noticed something odd. Our savings and revenue numbers didn't match the expenses I remembered recording. Curious and a little uneasy, started tracing payments back. That's when it hit me. My family had been living off our hard work, our business, without ever asking directly or even realizing it. Luxury vacations, home renovations, private school tuition for my sister's kids, it was all quietly funded through the systems I had set up. My name attached to invoices and bank transfers they had no idea about. I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Relief that they hadn't outright stolen from me, anger that they were oblivious, and a strange, vindicating pride. They had disowned me, judged me, shamed me for marrying Emma, and yet here they were enjoying comforts I had earned. Unknowingly dependent on the very person they rejected. I wanted to scream, to confront them, to let them know exactly who was pulling the strings. But Emma's hand on mine kept me grounded. "Quiet power," she whispered. "Let them live in their ignorance. You're in control now." It was a strange, intoxicating feeling. Revenge without confrontation, triumph without acknowledgement. I could see my parents' lives being cushioned by my work, yet they remained blind to it, still priding themselves on their independence. Part of me felt guilty, wondering if this was cruel. But the bigger part, the part that had been disrespected, dismissed, and abandoned, felt a surge of empowerment. That night, I sat back, staring at the ceiling while Emma slept, and realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. Our love and hard work had not only survived their judgment, they were quietly rewriting the rules. My family, the people who had tried to control me, had no idea I was now the one controlling the flow of their comforts. And as I traced another round of payments to cover a new family emergency, a thought hit me like a cold wave. They're living off my name, and they'll never know it by the time our business really started scaling. The contrast between our lives and my family's was almost laughable. Emma and I were finally settling into a rhythm, working late nights, but celebrating every small victory, every new client, every project completed. Our apartment had become warm and lived in, filled with little signs of our personalities, photos, mismatched mugs, and a constant aroma of coffee and her baking. I loved watching her move through the space, humming to herself, while I pored over spreadsheets and contracts. The life we had built, though modest compared to my family's, felt real, earned, and ours. Meanwhile, my family kept stumbling blindly. Unaware of the source of their sudden luck, they started calling less formally, dropping hints of indulgent plans or minor financial requests, completely oblivious that it was our hard work keeping them afloat. I began to notice the irony my disowned status had turned into silent power. I could control the flow of their comfort without ever saying a word. Every subtle boast they made about new furniture or school fees secretly funded by me was a reminder of the reversal. And yet, the empowerment wasn't without tension. There were moments when old habits of guilt and duty crept in. Emma would catch me staring at the phone after a call from my mother, a mix of resentment and lingering familial love written all over my face. "Let it go," she'd say softly, nudging me with her shoulder. "They don't even realize they're playing in our sandbox. That's our edge now." She was right. For the first time, I realized I didn't need their approval, their gratitude, or their recognition. We were untouchable in ways they couldn't comprehend, still. The tension simmered beneath the surface, a quiet reminder that they could never know the truth. And somewhere deep down, I knew that this delicate balance, this silent leverage, could shift at any moment. Something told me that before long, my family would try to push harder. Test the boundaries and I'd have to be ready to hold my ground. It hit me one night like a punch I hadn't expected. I was sitting alone in the apartment. It's the hum of the city outside our window, the only sound, and the weight of everything pressed down on me. I realized I was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally. Every month, every small victory in business, every effort to keep Emma and me afloat, seemed to feed my family's lifestyle without them even knowing it. I was disowned, dismissed, yet somehow still responsible for their comforts. The irony should have been satisfying, but instead it left a hollow ache in my chest. Emma noticed immediately. She leaned against the doorway, her face calm, but her eyes questioning. "You're carrying too much," she said softly. I wanted to snap, to tell her I could handle it, that I had always handled it, but my voice caught. I couldn't. The guilt gnawed at me, not for them exactly, but for the tension it created between us. For the knowledge that our success was tied invisibly to people who had hurt me. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, balancing pride, love, resentment, and responsibility, and one misstep could send everything crashing down. The loneliness was crushing. I remembered nights before meeting Emma, when I had pored over plans and dreams alone, thinking love would solve everything. Now I had her, and it should have been enough. But the shadows of my family's disapproval, their silent dependence, and the constant tug of obligation made me question if happiness was ever truly attainable. For a moment, I imagined walking away from it all, abandoning both my family and my business just to feel relief. But then I looked at Emma, asleep on the couch, a soft snore breaking the silence, and I felt her hand in mine, warm and real. I knew that whatever I chose, we were in this together. And even in the depths of despair, a quiet resolve formed inside me. I will not let them control me. I will rise even if they have to live in ignorance of it. Yet that night, as the city lights flickered outside, I couldn't shake the thought, the next storm is coming. And it's going to hit harder than anything we've faced. It started innocently enough, or at least it seemed that way at first. My younger brother called one evening, his voice unusually casual, almost too friendly. "Hey, just wanted to see how things are going with your business," he said. I could hear the underlying curiosity in his tone, the kind that didn't belong to someone who was genuinely interested, but to someone probing for weaknesses. Over the next few weeks, his calls became more frequent, more pointed. Subtle hints about opportunities or ideas he had, all framed as casual suggestions. But I knew better. He was testing me, trying to find an angle. A crack in the armor I had built with Emma. I watched quietly, pretending ignorance. Emma noticed the tension immediately. "Don't react," she whispered one evening as I hung up the phone, her hands steady on mine. "Let him show you who he really is. You're already ahead, just watch." And she was right. My brother's ambition had always been masked as charm, but now it was blatant. A desperate attempt to claw at the very life I had built without him. I felt a mix of amusement and irritation. Knowing exactly how to play this game while remaining untouchable, meanwhile, my parents remained oblivious. They continued their indulgent ways, still unaware that their comfort came from the son they had rejected. Every boast about a new appliance, a weekend getaway, or a tuition payment fueled a quiet satisfaction in me, but also a simmering wariness. I knew it was only a matter of time before someone closer, my brother, tried to manipulate me for personal gain. That night, Emma and I sat in our modest apartment, I traced the financial flows again, checking every detail. Everything was in order, everything under control, but the tension had shifted. My family wasn't just blind, they were ambitious, hungry, and dangerously close to testing limits they had no idea existed. And I realized with a chilling certainty that the real battle wasn't over money or judgment, it was over power. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and thought, they're about to learn that underestimating me was the biggest mistake they'll ever make. The confrontation came when I least expected it, though in hindsight, maybe I should have seen it coming. My mother called one evening, her voice sweet, almost too sweet. "We need to talk," she said. "You've been distant, and we just don't understand why." Felt my stomach twist. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation, a guilt trip wrapped in concern. I could hear my father muttering in the background, his tone tight, controlling, as if rehearsed lines of disappointment would bend me to their will. When I arrived at their house, the tension was thick enough to touch. My siblings hovered like vultures, smirking and waiting for me to falter. "We've always supported you," my mother began, "and now it feels like you've turned your back on us. We expected more from you." Every word dripped with manipulation, but I had long since learned the power of silence. Emma's quiet confidence echoed in my mind. "They don't know. You're in control." I didn't argue. I didn't justify. I let them vent, let them parade their assumptions and accusations. And all the while I could feel the quiet irony simmering inside me. They had no idea that their comfort, their luxurious weekend trips, even the tuition payments for my sister's kids, were funded by the very person they claimed to reject. The thought brought a strange calm over me, a sense of quiet victory. They asked questions, tried to guilt me, tried to probe for answers, but I remained unreadable. Each smile they expected, each hesitation they anticipated, I withheld, keeping my knowledge and my power close to my chest. The air was heavy, charged with resentment, pride, and the unspoken truth. As I left their house that night, the city lights casting long shadows across the streets, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: complete control. I knew they thought they were confronting me, but in reality, they were still dancing on my terms. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the full weight of that truth would hit them, though they would never see it coming. I began to embrace the quiet revenge, the kind that didn't need confrontation, drama, or shouting matches. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it stung more than any argument could. Whenever my family called for help or hinted at emergencies, I'd adjust the timing or conditions, ensuring they never suspected a thing. A tuition check might be delayed by a day. A small repair, covered just in part. Vacations subtly limited. Nothing overt. Nothing traceable, but enough to remind me that the balance of power had shifted. Emma watched me at first, curious, then supportive. "It's poetic," she said one night as we reviewed the accounts. "They shunned you, judged you, and now, unknowingly, they're living off the very person they dismissed. That's justice." Her words made me smile, a slow, satisfied smile that felt foreign yet liberating. For the first time, I realized revenge didn't have to be loud. It could be patient, precise, and quietly devastating. The beauty of it was in their oblivion. Every time my family faced a minor inconvenience, a bill coming late, a project taking longer, a sudden expense, they grumbled, blamed fate or mismanagement, never suspecting the truth. And I watched from afar, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and vindication. They had underestimated me, and now the consequences were unfolding in silence. Yet it wasn't just about control or revenge. It was about empowerment, claiming my life, my love, my success, without needing validation from the people who once rejected me. I had been disowned, dismissed, and underestimated, but in the quietest ways, I had risen above it all. Every subtle inconvenience I orchestrated reminded me of my resilience and the strength Emma and I had built together. That night, as I sat at the dining table going through the accounts, I leaned back, watching Emma fold laundry in the background. I whispered to myself, a slow grin spreading across my face. They're living off my name, and they'll never know it. And somehow, that was enough. I sat in our apartment that evening, the soft hum of the city outside mixing with the faint aroma of Emma's tea, and I finally felt the weight lift. Years of judgment, disapproval, and subtle manipulation from my family had been replaced with something far stronger: freedom. Emma leaned against me, her hand warm in mine, and for the first time, I allowed myself to savor the full picture. We had built a life together from scratch, endured the pain of being disowned, and quietly turned the tables on the people who had tried to break us. I thought back to the early days, the whispers, the snide comments disguised as jokes, and I realized something profound. They had no idea that everything they enjoyed, every comfort they took for granted, was tied to my hard work. My parents, my siblings, they were living off my name, completely oblivious to it. And I had chosen silence, patience, and precision over confrontation. That invisible power felt sweeter than any vindictive outburst could have. Emma looked up at me, her eyes sparkling in the dim light. "We did it," she whispered. "We survived them, and we've thrived." I smiled, thinking about all the little victories we'd claimed along the way, the subtle ways we had turned their ignorance into our advantage. For years I had carried guilt, doubt, and loneliness, but now it was gone. In its place was a quiet, unshakable confidence. I realized revenge wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was living well, thriving, and claiming the life you were always meant to have, while the people who doubted you stumbled unknowingly under your influence. And as I watched Emma pour tea into our mismatched cups, laughing softly at some story she remembered from work, I felt a calm certainty settle in my chest. We had not only survived their disapproval, we had risen above it, stronger, richer in love, and untouchable in spirit. And in that moment, I whispered to myself, finally, at peace. They thought they disowned me. In the end, they were living off my name, and I never had to remind them.